Hi, everyone. Right, so I didn't really see that. So just a show of hands, how many people actually heard of MongoDB? Good. So how many people are actually using MongoDB? OK, so quite a few. Right, so maybe just a quick introduction, right? So my name is James. As you can see, so I'm what you call a consulting engineer at MongoDB, right? So I've been with the company for about 2 years. I moved to London just for the job. Before that, I was in Germany doing a bit of web development and DevOps, right? So that's sort of my background. And in particular, my DevOps experience was with Puppet and Chef, right? So it's sort of a good follow-up from the previous talk. So I'm not going to talk about why you want to use this kind of tools, right? So I'm just curious, how many people are actually using Puppet? And Chef? Something else? OK. Ansible. OK, cool. Right, so one of the things that I sort of took away from doing the DevOps stuff a lot is, don't repeat yourself, right? So I think a lot of this was talked about in the previous presentation. And one of my memes that I really like is to automate everything, right? So you can imagine when I came to MongoDB, one of the first things that I have to do as a consulting engineer is to look at stuff like this, right? So to help customers deploy MongoDB, so we have sort of 3 main types of deployments, as you can see, right? So on this side, we have what we call the standalone. So this is pretty much if you run a single instance of MongoDB, right? You have something like that, right? So not something you want to do in production. In production, we recommend a minimum of a replica set, right? So a lot of it is similar to the first talk, in the sense that you have multiple nodes for failover, that kind of stuff. So we won't go into the details because we don't have time. And on the right-hand side, you have sort of a full-fledged deployment, what we call a sharded cluster, right? So this is usually for larger deployments where you have a lot more data and you need performance, right? So you can imagine, we will be doing a lot of this kind of deployments internally for testings, for POC, and also at customer sites, right? So doing all this manually can be done, but it's error-prone. It's going to take a long time, right? And if you blow up the last one, right, it's going to look something like this. You have a few components. Again, I won't go into details because we don't have time. But essentially, you have data nodes, right, for each shard. So the idea is to have a divide and conquer strategy, right? You have every shard holding a different piece of data, right? So when you want to scale out, all you have to do is just add additional shards. And MongoDB is going to move the data automatically for you, right? So there are quite a few moving parts, pretty much MongoDB related, the MongoS, the config servers, and the MongoDs, right? So when I joined about 2 years ago, you can actually deploy all this stuff pretty easily. There's this tool called mLaunch, right? So if you Google for this, MongoDB mLaunch, you will find it. Pretty much in this one command, I can run a sharded cluster with 3 shards, 3 config servers, a replica set, right? Just kind of repeat it. And this would actually just launch the whole cluster, right, in 20, 30 seconds on my laptop, right? So this is really good for testing stuff, right? You can spin up a replica set, a sharded cluster, try to test, the failover, stuff like that. But the downside is that this only works on a single machine, right? So what we came up, or actually what I came up with, so we have this thing called a demo bash, right, some time ago. The idea was, to give people on the team, it's sort of like a hackathon internally, right? Give us a couple of days to hack on something we want to do. So this is what I came up with. So I used something called Vagrant. Anybody heard of Vagrant? OK, so most people know. That's good. Along with Chef, right, to basically write a simple script to spin up stuff in Amazon EC2, right? So if you don't know Vagrant, I was going to talk about it, but people know about it. So yeah, I'll skip this. And the script output looks something like this, right? So not super interesting what it does. Essentially, it will spin up an EC2 instance, right? So that's the instance, and basically set up the cluster that I want, right? So that takes, I don't know, 7 minutes or so. So that's pretty cool, right? But of course, if you want to spin up all kinds of different instances, you have to do a lot of customization, right? So that's kind of a pain, right? So a lot of times, you also have to look at the production nodes quite a lot, right? So if you are running MongoDB in production, and you haven't read this, please do. Right? So it's a whole list of do's and don'ts to optimize your deployment. Right? So I won't go through all the details, but there's stuff like TCP keep alive. You want to configure that. You want to configure things like transparent huge pages and stuff. Right. So what we have today, actually, I'm pretty happy to say, is MMS. How many people have actually heard of MMS? OK, not many people. So that's good. So MMS is what we call the MongoDB management service, right? So it started out being called the MongoDB monitoring service. And over the years, we added more and more aspects, right? So we started with monitoring. Then we added backups. And now, more recently, a couple of months ago, we launched automation, right? So that's what I'm going to talk about. Yeah, and this makes us pretty happy, right? So I don't know if you guys know DevOps Borat. He's pretty funny. You should follow him on Twitter. So I'm skipping a few slides, right? I was going to do a live demo, but I've been told that it's not a good idea to do it here. So once you use MMS, right, it's a free account. You can sign up for free, right? You can get to a page something like this. So now I can just point and click in the UI. So I want to deploy, in this case, into Amazon EC2, right? So here I can deploy locally to my laptop, to my workstation, Amazon EC2, or other servers, right? Could be your own data centers or whatever. So I'm going to click on this guy. And then it's going to ask me what I want to deploy, right? So similar to the slides we saw before, this is the standalone, the replica set, and the sharded cluster, right? So in this case, I'm going to click sharded cluster, right? Then I have to provide more details, the name of the cluster and so on, how many shards. So 3 shards, how many nodes per shard. Because I'm going to launch in Amazon EC2, I'm going to give it credentials, right? So next. Now I can choose what kind of instances to launch, right? So I want to give a prefix for the server name, the host name, basically, the region, Amazon Linux, and the instance type, right? So it's a bunch of stuff. And now, basically, MongoDB will start, or MMS will start provisioning the servers in Amazon EC2, right, automatically for you. So in this case, I chose 8 servers, because actually you get 8 servers for free. Beyond that, you have to pay some amount per month. And once it's up and running in a few minutes, you see something like this, right? So at this point, you have the 8 EC2 instances spun up for you, right? And you can see, or you probably can see, a bunch of services related to MongoDB running there, right? So at this point, you can see all the MongoS's, the agents, and so on. And you can pretty much drag and drop these servers in this UI, right, to move them around, right? So that's pretty useful. So once you're happy, you click, you scroll down, you click confirm. It's going to actually connect to these instances and basically configure it like you asked it to, right? So when it's done, you'll see a nice UI like this. So in this case, I have my replica set, 3 shards, right? RS0, 1, 2. And then each of them has 3 data nodes, or 3 replicas, right? And that's pretty much it, right? So all this will take maybe 10 minutes to spin up from scratch. And so that's very useful for deploying a test instance, or even an actual production instance, right? And the nice thing about it is that we automatically apply all the production node settings. So tuning the file system, tuning the system, all for you, right? So you don't have to do all this tuning yourself. So if you want to change some settings, you can basically, click on this guy. It's going to pop up. You probably can't really see, but you can choose the version number. You can choose the ports, how many MongoS's, a whole bunch of details, right? So in this case, you can scroll down. I can change additional settings, like if you want to change the op log size, so basically the replication log, if I want to increase it, if it's too small, right? I can just change it here, click apply. I get a confirmation like this, right? So is this really what I want to do? So I wanted to, it wasn't specified, and now I want to change it to 10 gigabytes, right? So just by clicking a UI, it's going to do it for me, right? So you can do all kinds of stuff like upgrades or downgrades, changing all kinds of settings from this UI. Right? So I click apply, and you can see it's spinning and it's doing stuff. Right? So another nice thing about it is that the easy way to do this, right, is to shut down everything, right? Change the setting and bring everything up again, right? Obviously, that's not very nice in production. So what we do is what we call rolling deployment, right? And the software does it for you. So we take one of the secondaries, we basically change the setting, bring it up again, and do the other one by one. So this way, you minimize the downtime that you have. There's a whole bunch of settings, so I'm just going to run through some quickly. So you can change the version that shows up, right? So by default, it's going to show all the versions, but that could be too much. So you can just fine-tune to the versions that you've tested, right? You can configure authentication directly from this UI, right? So you can say, I want to turn on authentication. There's a bunch of default users. I can add users here, like, a user for the DBA, a user for each application, right? You can also define custom roles. So MongoDB has a bunch of built-in roles, DB owner, DB admin, and so on, right? There's a whole long list. So you can use one of those, or you can basically pick a combination, inherit from it, and then define your own custom ones, right? So if you click on this, it's going to pop up, and you can customize all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty cool. So once you have automation deployed, right, or your cluster deployed with automation, it's automatically connected to the monitoring part as well, right? So here you see actually one of our block stores that we use in production. So you get some nice overview of how much data, a lot of charts, right? So we don't have time, so we won't go into details here. But yeah, you can see a lot of cool stuff here. Here's the list of instances I've launched. So if you want to, you can connect to it through SSH here, download the keys. You can terminate the instance here as well. So that's pretty much it. Any questions? Do I have time for questions?
I have one.
You have one,
is
OK.
Is there an API or something?
Yes, there is a REST API.
Okay. So any question while we switch?
Sorry, one last thing.
Yep.
One last thing, we're hiring, so anybody interested, come talk to me.
OK, thank you.